Welcome back outside Gillette Stadium, everybody. My name is Mike Petraglia, joined by Chris Price, expert writer for WEEI.com, covering the Patriots. Chris, it's a great day, sunny, 80-degree day, OTAs, the first week wrapping up here today, Thursday, outside Gillette Stadium. And lo and behold, we have some summer-like training camp weather greeting us. And, a question I have for you, your observations on watching these guys in numbers for the first time this spring.
Yeah, it was kind of nice to see them in numbers as opposed to the T-shirts and shorts that we've seen in years past. It was much easier to identify these guys. Look, I want to be absolutely clear when I say this.
Which is always a good thing.
Exactly. Let's try not to read too much into personnel, combinations, that kind of stuff, because this is, as Bill has reminded us on more than one occasion,
right.
This is the teaching time of year. This is when stuff gets installed. This is when people really kind of take a hard look at the playbook, see what works, see what doesn't work. And so in terms of who's getting reps at left guard as one guy as opposed to another, I don't want to read too much into it. At the same time, it's interesting, not a lot of the offensive difference makers were out here today. Julian Edelman, Rob Gronkowski, Danny Amendola, as predicted. Not a lot of the starting offensive line was out there today. So it gave some guys like, let's say, DJ Foster, Chris Hogan, some of the guys to the middle to the lower end of that depth chart, Joe Tooney.
Donald Brown,
exactly. Gave them some time to be able to build some chemistry with the quarterback. So I think that in itself is one of the positives you could take out of today.
One thing you were mentioning off camera before we began recording, Chris, is every year it seems Tom takes one new guy under his wing. And maybe it's because everybody else was absent or, rehabbing injuries. He had no other choice but to take a guy like Martellus Bennett aside, do some one-on-one work with him individually. We've seen that in years past, obviously, with guys like Randy Moss. But what did you observe in what they were doing on the sideline and obviously what they were able to do on 7-7 in full drills?
A lot of that is because they are new to the system in years past. Now, obviously, there have been guys like Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, Rob Gronkowski, Randy Moss, guys that you've mentioned, where he just gravitates toward in situations like this because it just makes sense to be able to develop as much time, as much chemistry as you can with these guys, because these guys are going to be the guys who are going to be able to take you from here to here, November, December, January. I thought Bennett had a really good start from the session that we saw today. He was working with Brady. Brady was able to kind of, like I said before, gravitate toward him. He was part of a group initially that included Clay Harbor, and then a little bit later on included guys like James Devlin, Aaron Dobson, Malcolm Mitchell. A lot of those guys were out there, but the guy who was really with him more often than not throughout the course of a large chunk of the day today was Martellus Bennett. It's going to be fascinating to see when Bennett and Gronkowski are out there what the offense looks like.
Now, this year, another thing that's different, and correct me if I'm wrong, we have three quarterbacks in OTAs as opposed to just Brady and Garoppolo. And Jacoby Brissett garnered a lot of attention here, and it's not that we're overlooking Jimmy Garoppolo, who may or may not be starting the 2016 season for the Patriots. We'll get to more on that a little bit later. But Jacoby Brissett, I thought he looked pretty good. As the practice went on, he threw with more authority. Your general observations, the good, the bad, and where he needs to improve.
I think that's the perfect phrase to use. He threw with more authority as the practice continued on. I thought early on he was a little bit jacked up. He overthrew a couple of guys. It looked to be a problem in the early going. Whatever the situation was, they were able to minimize the problems, and he was able to deliver the ball in a much timelier fashion later on in the practice than he did earlier in the practice. It was interesting to see, though, the first interception that we've seen, they've had practices before that, but the first interception that we saw today was Cyrus Jones picking off a Jacoby Brissett pass. But I thought, again, I think your point is a very good one. I thought Brissett started a little shaky, but certainly kind of rounded into form as the afternoon went on.
He also threw a beautiful fade pattern to rookie receiver Malcolm Mitchell, showing the touch. And look, at this point of not even camp, not even mini camp, we're in OTAs. These are organized team activities for a reason. Everybody's trying to get their rhythm down, get on the same page with everybody else. And like you said, it's not about competition, it's about teaching.
Yeah, right now there are some areas of competition, and there's some really intriguing positional battles that I think start now and continue through the spring and into the summer. But right now, it's more about teaching. It's more about installation. It's more about finding what pieces fit better than others in certain positions. I think that, there's some areas that I think will really need to be looked at as the spring goes on, as the summer goes on. We've talked about the nickel corner job, the backup swing tackle job. But again, without the full complement of guys on the field at this point, it can be a little difficult to try and forecast who's ahead of who.
All right, defensive players spoke after today's OTAs. 3 stuck out. 2 newcomers in Chris Long and pot roast Terrence Knighton. If he has a significant role on this team, he's going to be a blast to cover. But I want to get to somebody you were around at the very start of media availability, and that's Dont'a Hightower. He wasn't very forthcoming, as you might expect, of talking contract.
Yeah, he wasn't very effusive, I'll say that. He basically shut any talk of his contract down. He said, look, I'm just out here trying to get better. I'm trying to help my team, trying to, do what I need to do to be able to get ready for the season. But he was not having any talk of the contract. No. We didn't get Jamie Collins. I didn't see Jamie Collins anyway. Jamie Collins is another guy, Malcolm Butler. Granted, his situation is a little bit different than those guys, but he was not out here today as well. So Hightower was the first guy that we had a chance to talk to about his contract. He didn't say much, but it's going to be intriguing to see that story as it develops over the next 12 months.
Your takeaways from Terrence Knighton. I asked him about his conditioning, and he looked me straight in the eyes and said, what do you mean? Obviously, the weight issue is going to be a big deal, and he knows that coming in. And then I said, to be more specific, have you set a goal, and how far along are you in the process? And he says, look, it's a day-by-day process. I'm going to do one thing. I am not going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. That keeps me focused on the next day.
He said his primary goal is to stay stout in the middle. And I think that given the guys that we've seen come through here over the last decade plus, the Keith Trailers, the Vince Wilforks, the Ted Washingtons, you want him to be a little bit more on the bigger side, quite frankly. And if he can manage that weight sufficiently, I think it's a good thing. I do think, look, I got to throw this in there as well. You talk to Long, you talk to Bennett, for any stretch of time, and you talk to Terrence Knighton. If those guys are half as good as social media, or they're half as good as football as they are at social media, this is going to be a really good football team. Again, I don't want to read too much into positions, who was playing alongside who, but the sight of Knighton out there, he's a big guy in the middle. I also thought it was interesting to hear him defer to Malcolm Brown. Malcolm Brown, going into his second year now, really in a lot of ways is one of the primary veterans of that defense. There's no more Wilfork, there's no more Mayo, especially when you're looking up front. Silver Saling is not here anymore. Chris Jones is not here anymore. Those guys who have been fundamental elements of that defensive line are no longer here. Malcolm Brown is, and Terrence Knighton said, look, we're looking at him. We're trying to figure out what to do. He's putting us in positions that we should be in. So it's interesting and fun to watch the evolution of a young player like Malcolm Brown kind of go from here to here.
All right, it's the elephant in the room, and it will be for the foreseeable future. 2 documents filed this week. Everybody knows about the in-bank hearing that was filed. Tom Brady and the NFLPA filed on Monday. There was another filing on Wednesday by the New England Patriots. I find the one that the Patriots joined in on very interesting for the simple reason we've never seen it before. An NFL team joining an NFLPA litigation matter against the league. It's so rare.
The closest thing we've seen over the years is the Raiders, who brought legal action against the league on a handful of occasions. I don't know how many times, but I think the Patriots raised the stakes a little bit. I don't think that they've gone all in because they fundamentally partnered with the NFLPA in this situation. But it's going to be fascinating to see the result of the amicus brief, to see if it's able to move the needle legally for Brady's case and Brady's situation. So, this is where we are. And right now we are all playing the waiting game in regards to the en banc request to see if that could be fulfilled. It's our understanding that, it usually takes between 4 to 6 weeks. So if this holds true to form here in regards to Deflategate, we're either going to hear about it tomorrow or sometime in October, the way things have gone.
So, Chris, the question I have for you is, if the Second Circuit Court of Appeals denies the en banc, which is a possibility, does Brady take it to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I believe he continues this as far as he can continue it. I think he's going to exhaust every single possibility along the way to be able to play that season opener against Arizona in September.
A lot of material covered here on the first week of OTAs, which wrapped up here on Thursday outside Gillette Stadium. Be sure to follow us on WEEI.com, the It Is What It Is blog, and, of course, all of Chris Price's postings and columns on WEEI.com. For Christopher Price, I'm Mike Petraglia, outside Gillette Stadium, WEEI.com.